Death Forgiven. Alperico, my close friend, had a tragic ending. He was a red, green, and yellow parrot that had been smuggled from Mexico by Don Pancho, an undocumented farm worker who was my father's friend. When we first got Alperico, he spent most of the time as in a makeshift wire cage Roberto, my older brother, built for him. But once he learned to trust us, he became a family member. Alperico wandered around freely in the dilapidated garage where we lived while harvesting Mr. Jacobson's vineyards. Whenever he was out of the cage, we closed the garage door, the only opening large enough for him to fly out. I and the rest of my family grew to love Alperico. I spent hours teaching him to say, "Periquito bonito." His favorite pastime was walking back and forth across a long wire my mother sometimes used for hanging our clothes to dry. It stretched from one end of the garage to the other. I would place a grape box directly underneath Alperico, climb on it, stretch out my arm, and hold up my index finger close to my toes so that he could perch on it. He would slowly walk sideways, tilting his head from side to side, repeating, "Periquito bonito," as he grabbed my finger. I would lift him and bring him close to my face, touching my nose to his beak. He would stare at me sideways and rub his beak against my nose until I would kiss his head. The affection Alperico and I had for each other was matched only by his attachment to Catarina, a spotted black cat that belonged to Chico and his wife Pilar, a young Mexican couple who, like the parrot, were undocumented. They lived in one of the stables next to the garage. Chico, Pilar, and Catarina visited us often on the evenings after work. Alperico and Catarina grew on each other little by little. Eventually they became such good friends that they even ate leftovers, beans, rice, and potatoes from the same plate. When Chico and Pilar visited without Catarina, Alperico would get very upset. He would flap his wings and make such a loud shrieking sound that it made the wire vibrate. This would irritate my father, who could not stand any noise, especially when he was tired from work, which was most of the time. One early evening, Chico and Pilar came by themselves without Catarina. Alperico immediately threw a tantrum and began shrieking louder than ever. The noise struck my father like lightning. He had been in a terrible mood the last few days because he was not sure where we would work now that the grape season was almost over. Covering his ears with his hands, he bolted to the corner of the garage, grabbed the broom, and swung with all his might at my friend, who was perched on the wire. Red and green and yellow feathers scattered everywhere. Alperico hit the dirt floor like a wet rag. Instantly, Roberto, Mama, and I started wailing. My father shouted at all of us to stop. Seeing a stream of blood dribble from Alperico's silent beak, I felt as though someone had ripped my heart out. I threw the garage door open and darted out, running as fast as I could toward a strange shed that was about half a mile away. The shouting, screaming, crying from our house chased me. I wanted to escape, to die. I had finally reached the shed, dragged myself in, and closed the door behind me. It was dark and quiet. I fell on my knees and prayed for Alperico. The repetition of Santa Maria, Madre de Dios, ruega Señora por los pescadores, ora en la hora de nuestra muerte, amen, slowly comforted and soothed my soul. Then I prayed for my father. The next day after work, Roberto Trompeta and I buried Alperico in a cigar box we found in Mr. Jacobson's trash can. We dug a hole about a few feet deep in front of the rows of the vineyard behind the garage, placed the box inside and covered it with dirt. Roberto made a small cross from sticks and laid it on the ground. We stood there silently for several minutes and then went home. I visited his grave every day until we moved to Corcoran 2 weeks later to find work picking cotton.